Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Big Sky. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we're continuing this conversation I had in the previous episode where I was like, okay, the show seemed like it was going through a little bit of a restructuring and just how it handled things. Once again, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but once again, every arc in this show has everything is typically allocated to an arc that there are cases that are all pieces to the same puzzle essentially. So it felt like, now that we got into this third episode, it almost felt like, okay, so this is another case, a case that Bo and Ginny are looking into. It was a murder. And I was like, okay, so maybe this is another one of them. I'm like, oh, it's really interesting. And, jumping ahead a little bit, we do find out it does tie into some other plot elements. So it might be it might be the B plot of the season. Because the missing hiker, everything was Sunny's, place. That seems to be, the A plot. But this seems to be the B plot. But like I said, we'll circle to that, because what started off as them investigating a murder, which I love, they had the different perspectives on. She's like, oh, let's just kind of go here. Bo's like, no, that's how you get shot. He's like, at least in Texas, they'll offer you tea before they didn't shoot you, But it's a guy's brother was murdered, and because they were in the process of losing the ranch. They used to own a lot more land, but now the ranch was all that they had left. So they got involved in a scheme that this couple scammed them out of money. And the moment Jenny was like, oh, a blonde hair woman, I was like, who is it? I started running through the Rolodex. I'm like, that doesn't seem like it fits the description of anyone, especially because she's like, oh, it was a married couple or something. I'm like, who could it be? I was like, doesn't sound like anyone specifically we would know. But we find out why Jenny immediately knew, because it ends up being her mom, which I was like, I don't think we've ever touched on Jenny's family circumstances. Maybe that came up in season 1. I feel like season 2 they didn't touch on it at all, but maybe it came up in season 1. I'm just not remembering. But apparently her dad bailed on her at her and her mom. But it seems like her mom is a career criminal. She's a grifter. She constantly scams people out of their money. And this whole was it Starbright, whatever scheme where they basically fleece people out of their money with this whole investing into this gold refinery type of thing. Which, once again, my brain being what it is, I'm like, oh yeah, Jensen Ackles, who was in The Boys, which, hey, one of the characters in The Boys is Annie, aka Starlight. Reading way too much into that, my brain couldn't help but make that connection. But either way, Jenny doesn't want to cut her mom any slack, because she knows exactly who her mom is. She the scam, the guy involved in the scams, who might be involved in all of this. It seems like her mom never stays with one particular partner. It seems like whatever schlup she ends up working with, any poor sap, I think is kind of what she kind of phrased it as. But it just kind of moves on from partner to partner, doing her thing. And the last time she heard about her mom is doing things in Idaho. Now her mom's back here in Montana, and is like, well, why? So she ultimately does confront her mom, wondering why that is. Why are you here? And she's like, well, my partner kind of screwed me up and screwed me over and took all the money. She's like, I basically brought him in the fold. I told him the ins and outs and everything, and then he kind of fleeced me and went off with the money. So she's like, I'm trying to get back. That's what I'm here for. Which multiple times Jenny's like, is that really all you're here for? She's like, yeah. And I get to help out my daughter. It was such an afterthought. It's not I'm here to see you. You could have, to be fair, Jenny knows when she's lying. She's like, you're doing that hair thing. She's like, what? It's like, yeah, I know when you're lying, but I guess that's a good grifter for you. It's like, right, I want you to know when I'm I got to present the more obvious lies, so you don't really see the trick of the hand, once again, I use this time and time again. Lucky number 7 has forever kept this in my mind. The Kansas City Shuffle. Once again, just basic magic. While you're over here looking left, you're missing all the stuff that the right hand's doing. That's kind of the whole point of it all. It's just a giant metaphor for it. Either way, and that's what she was doing this entire time, especially because she spent time with Jenny. And I think for Jenny, on some level, she was almost hoping right, the problem is when we spend time like this together, I'm reminded you're not a good person. You weren't the best mother. But she's like, yeah, but we had good times. Remember that trip we went on before your dad left? We went to that Vegas trip, and she's like, basically, I lost all this money, but you want it back. He's like, you've always been my little lucky charm. And it's kind of, once again, just shows how irresponsible you are, because it's it shouldn't have been on Jenny to get the money back. But either way, it seemed like her mom is just so carefree, and I'm wondering where that came from. And maybe that's why, I mean, I think maybe that plays into why Jenny is kind of, well, I guess also being a PI for a while kind of lends itself to and because she's not very good at being restrained with the rules. We see that with like Tubbs, how like she would always kind of cut corners, even though she's got a badge now. She can't really go about things the way she did as a PI, but she still does. And part of me wonders, is it kind of ingrained in her, like a little bit of her mom is rubbed off her, where it's like, I don't like being confined to like one system. I like to do things my way. Granted, obviously she might shade things a little like tiny grayish, where it's like she might cross some lines here and there, like probably wouldn't handle things the procedural route, but the problem is like she would never cross a line like her mom is, and I think maybe that's why she got in law enforcement in the first place. Anything related, because she used to, well, because I know didn't Cassie go, I can't remember, because Jenny was just a full-blown cop, but then she quit. Cassie was in the academy at the time, wasn't she? But she never finished, because I think like her husband died, and that set everything back. But either way, so, but like I said, I think maybe that's why Jenny went she went the other route, just so she wouldn't follow in her mom's footsteps. But I guess it plays into like the fact is her mom was like, oh yeah, I got you this terrible cake thing. It's like, yeah, I just convinced you that it was your favorite because I never had the money to get you a really good cake. So it's like they probably always struggled to make ends meet, especially when it was just them after her dad left. But I guess it's like when you kind of live that life for so long, it just kind of sticks with you, because you find out, oh, I'm actually really good at this, and you kind of stick with what you're good at. And I guess in her case, it's being a criminal. So once again, it's about getting back the money this guy stole. And it's like, well, did he murder the guy's brother? And it seems like he did. So Jenny and Bo have to go undercover. And I love the whole like, and Papaneck's like, I'll be on, nearby. And like him and Bo fist bump. And he's about to do it to Jenny's mom. But Jenny was like, no, we are not doing that. You're not about to fist bump my mom. It's like, no, we're not going to do like, this is a yay team, all yay camaraderie. It's like, no, we're not about to do that. So I thought that was so interesting. But, they end up taking the guy down. But the problem is Jenny's mom bails with the money. And just for Jenny, like, she's like, I knew not to trust her. I let my guard down just for an instant. Because I had this feeling when she was getting close to Jenny, I was like, is she taking something off of Jenny? Because that felt like your typical grifter/thief thing of just kind of that sleight of hand. It felt like that. Like, that's why I almost thought she took something off of Jenny. But it's like, no. But her just being like, no, you want to do me a favor? Just take that guy down. And it's like, right. She was planning on that so she could sneak in, take all the money. I was like, that's messed up. It's like, doing this, Jenny won't ever forgive you, because the whole point is they also had to like they have to pay that. That's like 30 grand. That's going to come out of everyone else's pocket. Like the person giving them the money. It's like, like what's going to happen if anything happens is money. It's like you're putting your daughter, you put her in a very terrible position. And just for her, she's like, right, I wanted to believe you could change. And it's like, I let myself, even for a second, believe that you were like, all right, I knew you were going about this selfish route, but, for an instant, I thought you could be a good mother, you could be a good person. And it's like, you couldn't. Not even for a minute. You just immediately, like, you were playing me the entire time, like, suckering me up. And that breaks Jenny's heart, it sucks. But then we get that stinger at the end where she shows up and she's there with Dono and Tanya, and the look on her mom's face looked annoyed. She didn't look like if she was like there'd at least be some form of like, hey, here's your money. Like she'd be smiling about it. Like she feels shitty about fleecing her daughter. But either one, she owed Tanya and Dono, and maybe this has something to do with the Ren thing. Maybe I feel like there has to be a reason why they've legitimized the business. I mean, Tanya wanted to do that regardless, but either they're still doing shady stuff on their own. But the fact is, Dono's here. Why would he be here if it wasn't like Ren ordering him to be here? So I can only assume this has still got to be something connected to the to that family, but maybe not. But it did seem like she was gung-ho about it. I mean, it's like, one, you are like scamming your daughter, so obviously that's not going to, but it's just like she looked annoyed and pissed, like, fine, I did what you needed me to do. So I'm like, oh, like, did they put her up to this? Did they threaten, like, oh, if you don't do this, like, she probably got in business with the wrong people. It's like, oh, cool, so now what you're going to do is you're going to work for us to pay off some debt you owe us, or maybe owes the Buller family in general. And it's like, cool, you're going to pay that off, And like, because if you don't, we got the connections, we will kill your daughter. Because like, Jenny's been all up in Tanya's grill. This could have been Tanya's way to get back at Jenny too. It's like, oh, you want to be all up in my grill? I'll be all up in yours too. It's like, oh, you want to? We could play that game. So I don't know. I don't know if this was just purely a revenge thing. Whether there's I feel like there has to be a greater purpose. So that's why I'm like, that seems like that's going to be the B plot. Because once again, I thought this was going to be such a separate thing, but it seems like it's playing into whatever Tanya and Donna are up to. I mean, maybe just getting back at Jenny was just like the icing on the cake. It wasn't the main goal, but it just happened to be a little extra on the side. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, what that ends up turning into. On the other side of things, we have Cassie and Denise investigating, because turns out Mark, the hiker, he has emailed his mom a picture being like, oh yeah, I'm totally not in the area I'm supposed to be, because they found his car and his itinerary. He had it labeled out where he was going to go, very scheduled out. And it's like, well, why would he be here? That's completely not where he said he was going to be. And I was like, well, we know. It's like, well, we know he's dead. So at first I was like, was it Walt that did it? But it seems like it was Sonny who did the whole thing with the phone. I mean, that's the problem when you do that, trying to pretend someone. You have to know their mannerisms, because she's like, his mom immediately was like, something's off. My son would never email me. That also doesn't seem like the thing a child would do with their parents. I would never, like, I don't know, it feels weird. I would never email my mom or my dad. I would always, like, you know, my dad, I would call. My mom, like, I could call or text, you know, so that's why I'm like, the fact is you couldn't call, obviously, but it feels like it'd be easier just to text. But maybe it's just because Sonny's so old school, like technology wise, it was just easier to email than it was to text. Like maybe she didn't, I don't know. Maybe she was I don't know. It just seemed like such a flaw in her planning. Not unless that was someone else's like thing to do, but I feel like that was most likely a Sonny thing. But, so they went to actually go investigate it. What I thought was interesting is that they're looking for Mark, and like lo and behold, they were so close, because Cassie ended up running into Walt, who's disposing of the body. We'll kind of connect that all together, but I'll circle back and kind of like connect that. But she ran into Walt, and he's like, it's like you would think. I mean, I think maybe he's not around a lot of people. He's kind of probably not all there mentally, so he might be not in the like healthiest mental state is what I'm saying. Like, so he seems like he is a little bit off, but you would think that he would kind of be like, oh no, like, thanks, help me with the car. It's like, I guess you don't want her checking out the backseat, but it's like, you being suspicious just makes you stand out that much more. She's just like, what's that in the back? He's like, don't worry about it. He's actually going to pull out a knife on him, which, good thing you didn't, because for one, you would have been killing a PI. Two, she had a witness with for Denise, so that wouldn't have gone down the way you wanted it to either way. So you would have had to kill two more people. That would have been a whole thing, because Cassie would have been, like, people would have noticed if Cassie wasn't around, so that would have been a whole thing, so. But now, you know, Sonny knows that he ended up running into Cassie, and that's a whole other headache. But circling back to why I'm saying, like, oh, he's not all there. When he dug up Mark's body, he's like, hey, time to go. Hey there, friend. And he's smiling. I'm like, he seems a little psychotic. The fact is, he also, like, the dolls, like, he, like, carves them, like, the little wood things he carves. I'm like, that's not a good thing. I'm sure your mom super would not appreciate you leaving evidence on a body like that. So if they ever do find his body, they're going to find that, and that's going to be a whole thing. That marker with the whole like little toy and shit, that might play into some of the previous crime scenes. Once again, Denise said the whole thing about like, oh, she knew about someone whose body was found and where Mark died. And it's like, oh yeah, the heart was cut out and everything. So, especially because Sonny says, it's always been you and me. We've got to be smarter about this. Because, you know, Walt was like, I didn't do anything. She's like, yes, but does that really matter? Because it's like, even if you didn't do anything, it's going to get people sniffing around here about stuff from the past that she helped her son cover up. There might, once again, God knows what other dead bodies are buried on that property. So I think that kind of plays into it. But tying that all together, we circle back with the whole Luke and Emily situation. Emily stumbled across him and she took off, and he's like, hey, wait, Emily. I'm like, you're not helping your case when you're chasing after her like that. Luckily, Cormac showed up in time, and he's like, yo, I'm sorry, it's not like that. I just got hurt, I feel. I'm like, and the fact is, Paige isn't here. And it's like, okay. And even Cormac picked up Emily's knife, and I don't know whether he was immediately, because he doesn't realize it's Emily's knife. He probably thought it was Luke's. He's like, this is suspicious. So he's not buying Luke's story of like, yeah, Paige took off. It's like, well, we as the audience know you were following her with a giant rock. So at first I was like, oh, he didn't kill her. She fucked him up. It might be both. He might have actually done it. But then you tie that in with like the interactions with Sonny later, and I'm like, well, jumping ahead, we now know Sonny's the one who took Paige, because it's like, oh, Paige's stuff is going. It's like, Luke wouldn't have had time to come back to the camp. Like, he doesn't know, like, he legitimately doesn't know his way around. He wouldn't have been able to get back to the camp and get her stuff. And so that's why I'm like, it's so interesting, like, they're coming, like, I guess Luke was kind of, like, either Luke didn't kill Paige and just assume, okay, she actually did leave. Like, he might not be wrong about that. He probably did try to hurt her or something like that and got fucked up in the process. Because we saw that light in the distance, and they never, I mean, they at least claimed to not know what that was about. So, implying that, at first I was thinking maybe it was Walt, but it doesn't seem like it's Walt, because he claims to have not run into Paige. So not unless he's lying to his mom, but she slapped the shit out of him. So like I don't think he's lying. So, but also really quickly, the Miley Cyrus session, but he got that little like news clipping or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, is that Miley Cyrus? And I was like, it looks like her. And there's even says her name at the bottom during that little bit of the article you can see. I was like, that's interesting on many different levels. It's like, well, for one, she's a Disney kid, and you know, this being an ABC, which is under the Disney umbrella, I just thought that was interesting. Two, it's like, well, I don't know what Miley would consider herself genre-wise, because I know she's done pop, but she's also done country stuff, too. Plus, her dad's Billy Ray Cyrus, so it kind of lends itself to that. So it's like, this season also having Reba, it just felt like, I felt reciprocal to some extent. I don't know. Like, there's something to that. I might be reading too much into it. I just thought that was interesting. So I'm like, what's that about? What is that about? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just like, right, just his mind not all being completely there. Maybe he latches onto something, and maybe Miley just happens to be the person. Because he even, like, when his mom strolled up, he made sure to hide that photo. I'm like, maybe it's kind of like a serial killer thing where it's like, oh, like, I pick people who look like, maybe he has like a thing for blondes or something. Like, you know, I don't know. But what I thought was interesting, though, like, when everyone was back at camp, obviously Sonny is super like, oh yeah, like this, yeah, Paige, she most likely went home, just like Luke said, they broke up, they had an argument, she was going to leave, and it's like, well, we know they're part of some shady dealing, and I guess maybe it's like, well, kill her to get all the money when it shows up, but also the whole thing about his mom and everything, so it's like mama's going to bail you out of this, and you're like, okay, so what's that about? So many threads there. Because because that's what I'm saying, like, Buck and Cormac definitely aren't in the know about everything that Sonny's doing. Like, whatever's going on between her and Walt, that's why I still say, like, Walt must not be, like, Buck's child or Cormac's brother. Like, there have to be half-brothers. Maybe, like, once again, that's I'd said previously, like, maybe that's her child from a different marriage or something, or maybe she just took him in. We'll have to wait and see, but because once again, it could be like she had Walt already, and then she met Buck, and Buck already had Cormac. That could be the whole deal. Maybe not. I don't know. The way she talked to Cormac that last episode, made me almost feel like, I mean, the line between adopted child and biological child, it's just a kind of a nothing thing necessarily. It's just like, I'm about to say, is like, would you treat an adopted child like that? But it's like, yeah, when that adopted child is basically your child, not basically straight up is your child, then there is no distinction, you know? So I guess that kind of, we'll see what ends up becoming of that. But the fact that she knows something's up because she's helping she needs to corroborate what Luke is saying, because if he did do something to Paige, it's like, I want that to not be an issue. So for now, I'm going to get these people out of here. I'm going to bury her stuff. She did make sure to take the gun that was in Jenny's stuff. So, not Jenny, Paige's stuff. So you're like, oh, that's Sonny with a gun. That's not going to be good. because Cormac went back out there to investigate. So because he's like, yeah, where I found Emily and them, I need to save. But once again, no one else, including Buck and Cormac and other guests, especially Emily, is believing this. But then you have Avery being so like, oh yeah, if that's what he said, it's like, well, they weren't the happiest couple. He was kind of a dick, so her just kind of bouncing makes sense. She's like, why did you come into the tent? It's like, oh, I told you. It's like, no, you specifically came into this tent. It's like, yeah, like, why did you come in here and why are you lying? So you're like, are you secretly a part of all of this? Like, cause we still don't know whose idea this trip was. It could have been Avery's, but you're like, maybe that's his connection. I don't know. He's definitely got some secrets, and I brought that up before. Like, are we going to find out? Is he going to be of a little bit of a T-Lock from last season, kind of shady, got his own thing going on? Or we, like, that's at first I was like, the fact that he's investigating is not telling anybody he found a gun in Paige and Luke's stuff. That's why I'm like, wait, are you like actually a cop, and Emily nor Emily's mom, nor Bo knows that about you? Or are you just up to some super shady stuff? Like, are you connected to this, whatever business dealings they had? So that's why you went looking through their stuff, because you're like, okay, where are they hiding? Whatever, maybe something they're supposed to be handing over. Because once again, there's supposed to be some money situation going down, so... And he won't give Emily a straight up answer. He's like, if something's going on, that's how you feel, honey, I'll help you. Because she's talking to like that other guest, and other guest is like, yeah, I'm not buying that either. Especially because Luke, which you're doing the stupidest thing ever. I mean, I hope for your sake you actually didn't do anything to Paige. Because if you did, you were the dumbest motherfucker. Like, why would you be back at camp where everyone can see you? You're Paige, you're like, oh, you and Paige literally just broke up and you're doing stuff with someone. Hell, even someone catches you, like you and that lady doing stuff, you're like, why would you do that? So like, he can't have killed Paige. Like, I still think she like jacked his ass up, and he doesn't want to admit, like, yeah, she fought me back because I was trying to like kill her, or just I don't know. It just makes you look that much more suspicious. But once again, the fact is, Avery's suddenly changing his tune about like, oh yeah, Emily will look for your knife because of how important it is, but also if this thing is bothering you, then we'll look into this whole Paige thing as well. And I'm like, the fact that you went full 180 on that makes me go like, something's off, something ain't right. So once again, you just happen to be here. I mean, I guess it is a happen chance. It's just unfortunate that Bo's daughter would get in the middle of all of this. I mean, obviously that's storytelling for you, but I think it's also like Avery he probably had no choice. He probably wanted to use bringing Avery, like, oh, he wanted to make this a whole thing, use it as an excuse to kind of do whatever shady business he might be dealing. That's why I'm like, I don't remember if they ever said in the first episode or even last episode. Well, I don't think it came up last episode, but maybe it came up in the first episode whose idea it was. Whether it was like Emily's, or I'm sure it was his suggestion. I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.